but new plans to protect it could affect the fishermen who catch the famous Cromer crabs.
Just leave us alone. We know what we've been doing. We've been doing it a really long while. It's in our benefit to look after it, which is what we do.
We'll also report from the End of the Pier show, the only one of its kind in the world.
Also tonight, the emergency in our rivers as 30,000 fish die. And victory for Daniel as he persuades the government to introduce a GCSE in sign language.
I'm on Cromer Pier, and you can get a real sense of it actually when you see it from the air. It's 151 metres long. It was built in 1901, but it hasn't all been plain sailing. In 1993 it was badly damaged when a runaway rig bashed into it and gouged a 40-metre hole. But millions has been spent restoring, refurbishing it. I think you can also actually see the church. Now, the church has the tallest bell tower in Norfolk. That's 160 feet high. Cromer has so much to offer. You can see here in this lovely early evening light, people still out enjoying the beach there. But we're going to start tonight with the sea right underneath my feet here. Europe's largest chalk reef is this area's best kept secret. It runs from Cley in the west all the way along here past Cromer and round to Trimmingham, round the corner there in the east. 2 years ago it was designated a marine conservation zone, which means it's protected. But recently plans to curb the amount of fishing and crabbing in the area has caused tensions with those that make their living from the sea.
23 miles of underwater wonderland, stretching from Cley to Trimmingham. This chalk reef is home to 350 species of marine life. As it's a marine conservation zone, only so-called soft fishing is allowed by those who use pots, not trawl nets. A few feet above, local fishermen harvest crab and lobster. But if more boats move in and lay more pots down on the reef, there's concern this delicate ecosystem could suffer. Which is why there's a plan to introduce fishing permits to restrict further access to the reef.
Running alongside that, we're also concerned about the sustainability of crab stocks, and we need to manage the level of fishing efforts on crab stocks and lobster stocks.
If you don't introduce a permit scheme, what are your concerns? What could happen?
Well, what could happen is that if fishing effort increased, then there could be excessive damage to the marine conservation zone, and similarly, crab stocks could be exploited beyond maximum sustainable yield.
No one knows better how to conserve the reef than those whose livelihood depends on it, so says the man who's fished these waters for 40 years. But John opposes what he says is yet more red tape.
Just leave us alone. We know what we've been doing. We've been doing it a really long while. It's in our benefit to look after it, which is what we do. So, you know, work with us. As I say, we have no problem with it being designated, but we will fight any further management measures tooth and nail.
More people are being drawn to this extraordinary underwater nature reserve, sculpted during the Ice Age. The biodiversity and beauty of what these divers are heading out to matches anything that Australia's Great Barrier Reef has to offer, but it too has a fragile ecosystem. The debate is how best to preserve it. So these chaps are normal. Rob and his team have mapped the entire reef. He wants some parts closed to see how far they recover.
I'd like to see no diver take, no angling take. Abroad, no-take areas are hugely productive, so they often work as nurseries which feed into what tend to be increasing local fisheries.
A compromise between the local economy and the local ecology will be reached. All know this habitat must be preserved. It's in everyone's interests. Alex Dunlop, BBC Look East on the North Norfolk coast.
Well, Rob Spray, who you saw in Alex's film, is with me here from Seasearch. Rob, do you think any of the people here actually realise this reef is here and how lucky we are to have it?
I think very few of them. I think quite a few people might go a bit tearful in a deep swimming pool, but to know that underneath here you've got miles and miles of chalk. It's 3 miles wide here. It's covered in crabs, lobsters, seaweeds, anemones, all kinds of stuff. And I think it's just another aspect of the North Norfolk coast which just makes it richer and more exciting if people know it's there.
you're obviously passionate about conserving it, but do you understand that argument that families for generations and generations have been fishing and crabbing here, and they say they know how to protect it?
Oh, I know it's been going on for a long while, and I'd say, well, if nothing ever changed, then they wouldn't be using fiberglass boats and outboard motors. So things do change and develop, and much better to have an informed, sustainable fishery that gives them a better living and their families a better living than risk the kind of problems there have been in the past. I never realised that the crab size was set in the late 1800s when there was a crash in the crab fishery, and so these things need to be considered in sort of modern terms rather than trying to cling to the past.
Now, you've been diving here for a long time. Have you noticed a lot of change over the years?
To be honest, what we see more is natural phenomena, like the movement of sand from one place to another, more chalk being exposed, the crabs going and eating different kinds of food. So we've not seen big influences other than maybe a few years ago there was an influx of newer potting, maybe to get grandfather rights in preparation for this kind of control.
Now this is a marine conservation zone. Do you think that goes far enough to protecting? Is enough being done by the government, for example, to protect those areas of the sea that need protection?
I could hardly imagine a weaker government on conservation at the moment. The designation of a marine conservation zone isn't just for the wildlife, it's also for the fisheries. And until we see what measures are put in place, we won't know whether it's too strong or too weak. And the hope is it will be balanced so that it's locally owned and locally appreciated and protects the wildlife for everybody. So it's a common resource.
But the fact that it has been made a zone surely is a positive thing in your eyes, because at least the government is saying this is important.
Definitely. I think it was just been made important and designated, and hopefully, yes, that'll play into conservation hands and the fisheries hands because the process has started, and so that's good news.
Rob, thank you very much for talking to us. We're going to be coming back to this quite blowy Cromer Pier later. Apologies for my hair, I think it's probably out here. We're going to be talking about the end of the pier show after the rest of the news with Stuart.
Susie, thank you very much. A family from Suffolk has won a legal battle